I never thought I'd be the guy writing one of these posts. You know, the guy who scrolls through Reddit at 2 a.m., shaking his head at the heartbreak and betrayal in other people's stories, thinking, thank God that's not me. But here I am, living what I always thought happened to other people. Not to me. Not to my family. I'm 34, born and raised in Michigan. I work in IT. Nothing glamorous, but it pays the bills and keeps a roof over our heads. My wife, Rachel, she's 32. We've been married for 8 years. Together for 10. No kids yet. We kept saying, next year, as we focused on getting our careers stable, on traveling, on making sure we were ready. Looking back now, I wonder if that was just another way I avoided seeing what was really going on between us. We met in college. She was a biology major. I was the awkward nerd who somehow made her laugh during group projects. Rachel was everything I wasn't: outgoing, confident, magnetic. Being with her made me feel like maybe I wasn't invisible to the world after all. Things were good for a long time. We weren't perfect. No couple is. But I thought we had something solid. We had our fights. Dumb ones about money, chores, her mom, God. Don't get me started on her mom. But we always found our way back to each other. Or so I thought. The first crack showed up last year when I started training with this guy Mark. I'd let myself go during the pandemic, working from home, stress eating, drinking too much soda. Rachel nudged me, gently at first, to do something about it. She said she was worried about my health. Said she missed how I used to hike with her, do all those weekend runs and bike rides. I wanted to be better for her. For me too, I guess. So I hired Mark. Mark. God, even typing his name makes my stomach twist. He was everything I wasn't. Tall, jacked, charming, the kind of guy who could probably sell you a used car and make you feel good about it. But he was good at his job. I started dropping weight, getting stronger. Rachel seemed happy. She'd even come to the gym with me sometimes, watching from the sidelines or chatting with Mark while I did my circuits. I didn't think much of it. She's friendly. She's always been friendly. Then, little things started to feel off. She'd laugh at his jokes a little too hard. Touch his arm when she talked to him. I told myself I was being paranoid. Insecure. Mark was my trainer, not my competition. Rachel was my wife. My wife. She loved me. She said so every night. She kissed me goodbye every morning. We had history. A life together. But the doubts crept in, like water through a hairline crack in a foundation. Slow, but unstoppable. I started noticing how her phone was always face down. How she'd suddenly start going for more solo runs, saying she needed time to clear her head. How she started working late, except when I'd surprise her at her office, she wasn't there. I tried to ignore it. Tried to tell myself it was the stress of work, the stress of life. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being pushed out. Replaced. The night I knew for sure was the night she came home late from yoga. She smelled like cologne. Not mine. Not the soap we kept in the guest bathroom. Mark's. I knew because I'd asked him once what he was wearing after a session. Some expensive, woodsy brand I'd never even heard of. She went straight to the shower. And I just stood there in the kitchen, hand shaking, heart pounding, like my body already knew what my mind wasn't ready to admit. That was the night I decided to find out the truth. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay there in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of the water running in the bathroom as Rachel showered. My mind was racing, my chest tight with dread. Every memory of the past few months played back in my head like some sick highlight reel. The late nights, the sudden interest in working out, the way she'd smile at her phone like it was telling her the funniest joke in the world. I told myself I had two options: confront her without proof and risk being gaslit, or dig deeper and find out what was really going on. I chose the latter. I wish I could say I felt good about it, that I felt strong or empowered, but the truth is I felt sick, ashamed, like I was crossing a line. But I had to know. I started small. The next morning, while she was in the shower, I checked her gym bag. Nothing out of the ordinary, just a towel, water bottle, some protein bars. But when I unzipped the inside pocket, I found a receipt from a coffee shop near Mark's apartment. Not near the gym. Dated the day before. 2 drinks. 1 black coffee, 1 chai latte. Her favorite. I told myself it could be innocent. Could be a coincidence. But my gut told me otherwise. Over the next few days, I became a man obsessed. I watched her more closely. Took mental notes of what she said, where she said she was going, when she came back. I checked our shared calendar, compared it to her movements. Things didn't add up. There were gaps. And those gaps grew wider the more I looked. Then, one Saturday morning, I did something I never thought I'd do. I followed her. She told me she was meeting a friend from work for brunch. I waited 10 minutes after she left, then got in my car and drove after her. My hands were shaking on the wheel, my stomach in knots. I felt like a stalker, like some deranged jealous husband from a bad movie. But I kept going. She didn't go to the brunch spot she told me about. She drove to a small park on the other side of town, the same park Mark mentioned once in passing during one of our sessions. I parked a few spaces away and watched as she got out of the car. A few minutes later, Mark pulled up. He got out and they hugged. Not a friendly, casual hug. The kind of hug that lingers. That says everything without a single word. They sat on a bench together, talking, laughing. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I didn't need to. The way they looked at each other, it was like watching a stranger. Like I didn't know her at all. I drove home in a daze. My heart felt like it had been ripped out of my chest. I don't even remember how I made it back without crashing the car. That night, she came home like nothing had happened. Kissed me on the cheek. Asked if I wanted to order takeout. I said no, said I wasn't feeling well. And I wasn't. I felt hollow. Numb. Betrayed. I knew I needed more proof that even she couldn't deny. So I did what I had to do. I bought a small recording device. Slid it under the passenger seat of her car. I hated myself for it. But at that point, I felt like I was losing my mind. I needed to hear it. To know for sure. And when I listened to the recording 2 days later, I got what I was looking for. Her voice. His voice. Talking about how careful they had to be. About how much they missed each other. About the night they spent together last month, how incredible it was. How they couldn't wait for the next time. I sat there in my garage, alone, listening to my wife talk about another man like I didn't even exist. And something inside me broke. That was the moment I knew there was no going back. I didn't sleep at all after hearing that recording. I sat in the dark garage, the car door cracked open, cold air rushing in, my mind racing. I kept replaying it, like maybe I'd misheard. Like maybe there was some other explanation. But there wasn't. You don't say those things to someone unless you mean them. Unless you cross that line. The sun started to rise before I moved. My body felt heavy, like I'd aged 10 years overnight. But I knew I couldn't keep this bottled up. Not anymore. I needed to confront her. I needed to hear it from her mouth. When she woke up, I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the empty coffee mug in front of me. She walked in, hair messy from sleep, wearing one of my old t-shirts like she always did. And for a second, I almost lost my nerve. Because looking at her, she looked like my Rachel. The woman I married. The woman I thought I'd grow old with. But then, I remembered the voices on that recording. The lies. The betrayal. And the anger, the heartbreak, the humiliation hit me all over again. "Sit down," I said, my voice low, trembling. She looked confused, maybe even a little scared. But she sat. "I know about you and Mark," I said. No build-up. No preamble. I just said it. Her face went pale. The mask fell away in an instant. For the first time, I saw guilt written plain as day across her face. What are you talking about?" she stammered, but she knew. God, she knew. "Don't lie to me," I said. I pulled out my phone and hit play on the recording. Her eyes widened as she heard her own voice. Heard the things she thought were safely hidden. I watched the tears well up in her eyes, watched her crumble in front of me. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she whispered. "It just, I don't know. I felt alone. You were always working. You seemed so distant. Mark listened. He saw me." That hurt more than anything. Because I wasn't perfect, not by a long shot, but I had tried. I worked long hours so we could build a good life. I thought we were a team. And now she was telling me that because I was doing my best for us, she found comfort in the arms of another man. "You had a choice," I said. "You chose him." She sobbed. Said she was sorry. Said she didn't want to lose me. That it was a mistake. That it wouldn't happen again. But it was too late. The damage was done. I told her I needed space. Told her to pack a bag and go stay with her sister for a few days. I needed to think. To breathe. To figure out what the hell I was going to do. She begged. Said we could work through it. That she'd block Mark. Quit the gym. Do anything. But I was done listening. I was too broken to hear it. She left that afternoon, and I stood at the window, watching her drive away, feeling like my world had just collapsed. The house was so quiet after that. Just me, the walls, and the echo of everything I thought I knew. In the days after Rachel left for her sisters, I spiraled. I stopped going to work. Stopped answering texts from friends. I barely ate. I couldn't sleep. I just sat there in the house we built together, surrounded by the memories of a life that suddenly felt fake. But the more I thought about it, the more my heartbreak curdled into something else. Anger. At Rachel, yes. But more than anything, at Mark. The man I'd let into my life. The man I trusted to help me become better, healthier, stronger. The man who stood there, smiling at me during workouts, shaking my hand, giving me advice, all while stabbing me in the back. I kept picturing his face. The fake charm. The way he'd slap me on the back after a session and say, "Good work, man." God, I felt like such an idiot. And then, one night, 3 days after the confrontation, I snapped. I got in my car and drove to the gym. I knew his schedule. I knew he'd still be there finishing up his last client. My heart was pounding, my hands gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I wasn't sure what I was going to do. But I knew I had to see him. Face him. I couldn't let him just slink off like nothing happened. When I pulled into the parking lot, I saw his car. He was still inside. I waited. Watched. And when he finally came out, gym bag slung over his shoulder, earbuds in, whistling like he didn't have a care in the world, I got out of my car. "Mark!" I called. He turned, surprised. His smile faltered when he saw my face. I must have looked like hell, tired, angry, broken. "Hey man," he started, like he could pretend everything was normal. I didn't let him finish. "You coward," I spat. "You stood there, week after week, shaking my hand, knowing what you were doing behind my back." His expression changed. He tried to play it off at first, like he didn't know what I was talking about. But when I took a step closer, he raised his hands. "Look, I didn't mean for it to happen. Rachel, she came on to me. I'm sorry, all right? Hearing him say her name made something snap inside me. I lunged at him. The first punch landed square on his jaw, and he stumbled back, dropping his bag. He tried to recover, tried to throw a punch of his own, but I was faster. I was fueled by months of betrayal, sleepless nights, humiliation. I hit him again. And again. He went down hard on the asphalt, blood from his nose dripping onto his shirt. He tried to get up, but I shoved him back down. You don't ever come near me or my wife again, I said through gritted teeth. My chest was heaving, my fists aching, but I didn't care. He just lay there dazed, hands up in surrender. I stepped back, breathing hard, heart racing. I didn't want to end up in jail, and I knew if I kept going, that's where I'd be headed. So I walked away, got in my car, drove home, hands still shaking on the wheel. When I got home, I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel like I'd won anything. But I felt like I'd reclaimed a piece of myself. Like I wasn't just some fool who let another man take what was mine without a fight. It wasn't the end. Not by a long shot. But it was the beginning of me taking my life back. After the fight with Mark, I drove home in a fog. My knuckles were raw, bruised, blood crusted on the skin where I'd split it open against his face. My heart was still racing, but the rush of adrenaline was fading, leaving behind exhaustion and a strange emptiness. I half expected the cops to show up at my door that night. I kept imagining Mark calling them, pressing charges, maybe even showing up with some sob story about how I attacked him unprovoked. But nothing happened. I think he knew he had it coming. Maybe he felt as ashamed as I wanted him to feel. Or maybe he just didn't want his own dirt dragged out in public. Rachel texted me that night. Just, "Are you okay?" I didn't answer. The next morning, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, looking at myself. The bags under my eyes. The hollow look. The man staring back at me didn't look like me. He looked like someone who'd been chewed up and spit out by life. And that's when it hit me. Hitting Mark hadn't fixed anything. It didn't erase the betrayal. It didn't bring back the man I was before this all happened. If I wanted real revenge, it wasn't going to be with my fists. It was going to be by rebuilding myself. By taking everything they tried to take from me, my dignity, my self-respect, and making it stronger. I started that morning. I sat down and made a plan. First, I called a lawyer. I wasn't going to let this marriage drag on in some sad, limping half-life. I wanted a clean break. I wanted to be smart. No rash decisions. Just facts, paperwork, and a path forward. Next, I reached out to my boss. Told him I needed a few days to clear my head, but that I was ready to come back strong. To focus. Work had always been my anchor, and I needed that right now. Then I cleaned the house, top to bottom. I boxed up the photos of us together. The mementos, the little things that kept punching me in the gut every time I looked at them. I didn't throw them away, I wasn't ready for that, but I put them out of sight, out of mind, or at least as much as I could, and I started working out again. Not with a trainer, not at that gym, just me, in the garage, with the weights I'd neglected for too long. Every rep felt like a way to burn off the anger, the grief, the shame. Every drop of sweat felt like washing away the pieces of myself I didn't recognize anymore. Rachel tried calling, tried texting. At first, I ignored it. But eventually I answered. Calm. Cold. I told her I'd filed. That this was happening. That I wasn't going to be her second choice, or some safe fallback when the affair excitement wore off. She cried, begged, said she'd do anything. But it was too late. I realized something in those days, after the fight. Revenge wasn't about destroying her life. It was about rebuilding mine, making sure I came out of this stronger, not bitter and broken. And I was just getting started. The day the divorce papers were served was the day I started to breathe again. I'm not going to lie and say it was easy. Signing those papers felt like signing away a decade of my life. But I knew it was the only way forward. Rachel tried, in those early weeks. She sent long emails, letters. She showed up at the house once or twice, crying on the doorstep. But I didn't let her in, not just the house, but into my heart anymore. I'd made up my mind. She'd made hers long before I did, when she let someone else take my place. So I focused on what I could control. I started my mornings early. Before sunrise, I'd lace up my shoes and run. I hadn't run in years, not really, but now it felt like freedom. Like I was putting distance between me and the man I used to be. The man who ignored red flags, who thought love alone could hold everything together. I went back to the garage gym, but this time it wasn't about revenge or anger. It was about proving to myself that I could do hard things, that I could rebuild one rep at a time. I put on music, old playlists from before things got messy, and let myself get lost in it. The weight on the barbell started to feel like a metaphor for all the weight I'd been carrying in my head. And slowly, my mind started to quiet down. The endless replay of Rachel and Mark, the what-ifs, the could-have-beens, they started to fade. Work helped too. I poured myself into my job like a man with something to prove. My boss noticed. My coworkers noticed. I started leading projects I'd been too distracted to take on before. And at the end of the day, when I closed my laptop, I felt like I'd accomplished something. Like I was building again, instead of watching things crumble. One of the biggest things I did, and maybe the hardest, was letting go of the anger toward Mark. Not because he deserved forgiveness. He didn't. But because holding on to it was like drinking poison every day, hoping he'd feel sick. I wasn't doing it for him. I was doing it for me. I changed my routines. New coffee shop. New route to work. New hobbies. I even started volunteering on weekends, something I had talked about for years but never actually done. Helping others gave me perspective, made my problems feel a little smaller. I kept my circle tight. A few good friends. My brother. People who didn't feed the drama, who didn't push me to get even, in some childish way. People who reminded me who I was before all of this, and who I could be again. And slowly, I started to feel like myself again. Or maybe a new version of myself. Stronger. Wiser. A little scarred, sure, but not broken. Rachel faded into the background of my life. A chapter I'd finished. One I didn't need to reread. People talk about revenge like it's loud. Like it's smashing windows, keying cars, shouting matches in parking lots. But the real revenge, the kind that actually matters, is quiet. It's waking up one morning and realizing that you don't think about them first thing anymore. It's looking at yourself in the mirror and seeing someone you respect staring back. It's building a life so good that their memory feels like nothing more than background noise. That's where I finally arrived. The divorce went through without much of a fight in the end. Rachel signed the papers, and just like that, we were done. No kids to complicate things. No house to sell, we'd been renting. Just two people who had once loved each other, now strangers on paper and in life. I moved out of that house not long after. Found a small place closer to the lake. Nothing fancy, but it felt like mine. I painted the walls how I wanted. Filled it with furniture I picked because I liked it, not because it matched some aesthetic we'd agreed on. Every little choice felt like taking my power back. I kept running. Kept lifting. The weight started to come off. Not just the physical kind, but the emotional kind too. I could feel myself getting stronger, inside and out. My friends said I looked different. Lighter. happier. And they were right. Mark? I never saw him again. He left the gym not long after our conversation in the parking lot. I heard he moved to another city. Good riddance. I don't care where he is. He's out of my story now. Rachel tried once more months later. She emailed me, said she'd been in therapy, that she was working on herself, that she hoped maybe one day we could talk. I didn't respond. Not because I hate her, I don't, but because there's nothing left to say. I'd already said goodbye in my heart a long time before the papers made it official. And the best part? I found peace. Not overnight. Not in some dramatic moment. But slowly, in small ways. Mornings with coffee on my porch, watching the sun rise over the lake. Evenings spent with friends, laughing until it hurt. Projects at work that I could give my full attention to, without the cloud of betrayal hanging over me. I learned that revenge isn't about destroying someone else. It's about refusing to let them destroy you. And in that sense, I won. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe one day I'll let someone new in. Maybe not. What I do know is this: I'm stronger than I ever knew. And I'm finally free.